Cool. So like I said, we are talking today about Lua modules. This is a feature we added in Designer 9.5. It's something that's always sort of been there. If you've used JSON or the XML or the OSC library, those are just Lua modules. And you're going to see the methods in which we use it are very similar. But we've decided to expand this and now give a way that you can include your own custom modules. So let's start off just with the basics. What is a Lua module? So here I've got an example. If any of you have taken good old Control 201, we are going to be bringing the Klarchik TV back today. Here is my code without a Lua module. Let it load. So to control this TV, I need 76 odd lines or so. And this works fine. There's nothing wrong with doing it this way. But what if, and this never ever happens, the display manufacturer changes API between model years? Or I have a really large project where maybe I want to keep all my code very similar and the same, but I want to be able, I might have different displays or be able to switch those displays out. Or going back even more simplistic, maybe I just have a chunk of code I want to reuse all the time. I have, in my case, I have a really nice little script I've written to get the list of all the components available in a design and filter them out by type. So that way, when I'm making I make a drop down for, hey, select your gain block, I have a little piece of code I use for that all the time. I could put that in a module and then just import that module into my code. So we're able to take all this code here, and by using a module, we see our text controller set up exactly the same. Now I can just require my module and now interact with it. And the beauty of this, and we'll circle back to this at the end of today, is when this code changes, all I do is just change what module I have in here or import, update my module, and now it will change everywhere. So maybe I thought I had one model of Klarchik TV, get out to the job site, and it doesn't respond how it did. In our case right now, it's responding with TCP, but the new version we're going to see later today decided they would use UDP for a command set. And maybe I've got this a casino, I got 400 or 500 displays on there. Instead of having to go change every single Lua script I have, I can just update my module and it will automatically pull those changes in. So that's sort of the real beauty of using modules in your scripting, is it allows us an easy way to bring in a common set of code. And to show what the back end of that looks like, I'm going to open up my Klarchik module. And here it is right here. So Lua modules today are authored outside of Q-SYS Designer. I'm using VS Code to author this, but you can see this looks very similar to what that first set of code was. So this is my module, and we're going to dive into how these are structured and everything. But this is my module right here. And if I were to make a change, Designer would automatically pull that change back in. Very similar, and it's a very similar workflow to if you've used CSS. So let's sort of look at, there are 3 parts when we author our own custom Lua modules. And all of these reside in My Documents, QSC, Q-SYS Designer, and you'll see when you install 9.5, you now have a folder called Modules. So very similar to CSS. If I want to make a new module, my new module, and that's what it'll be called. But then there are a couple pieces that go in here. So we have our init.lua. This is the main Lua code that is our module. It's always called init.lua. You are limited to using pure Lua. So what that means is, if I go out on the internet and find a module, because we follow the same formatting for Lua modules, there are some I can use, but you're really limited to what Q-SYS can do, what Lua libraries we support. So I can use any of the built-in native Lua libraries. I can use any of the Q-SYS specific Lua libraries. If you find a Lua module out on the internet and it doesn't have any special dependencies, you could bring that in and use that. One important thing, and we'll talk about this when we start diving into our 2 example modules, is it is always going to return back a single table. So how it is structured is it is a table that gets brought into our code, and we'll take a look at that. Our second part we have our info.json. So our info.json here is just a very basic little descriptor about the module. And this gives you the ability to bring a version number. Type right now is just Lua module, but we set this up to be able to possibly support other things in the future. The author, description, and then required version. So we added this field in to be able to specify, I wrote this against 9.5. I wrote this against 9.6 in the future. And that way you can tell the person who's going and getting your module what designer version is required for it. And we'll see when we go to look at our available modules, all this information is displayed very similar to how like Asset Manager displays information about a plugin.
And do you have to have a required version?
That is a good question. I don't think you have to specify it. I'll let Greg think about that one and answer it.
Yeah, my understanding is no, it's not a requirement, but it's encouraged.
Yeah.
And once you do have it, then designer checks against it and will throw an error if you are in a previous version to the required version?
That I am not entirely certain, but yes, that would be the goal. But that I would need to verify.
So
or is it mostly just for information purposes and up to the programmer that's bringing this module in to verify that they're in the version that whoever authored the module has required?
Yeah,
or has
informational first. Yes.
Okay, very well.
Yeah.
Just wanted to clear that up. I foresaw that question coming in before we even got there.
Yep. That's a good question. And then the last one is the README. So this is a README file. It is optional. You can leave it blank. But this is using Markdown, which is a very common language for authoring READMEs, that you can give a little bit of in this example. So I show some examples of how to use it. There's some code examples here. And you will see in the design resources, it will pull this in so you can read. You can give a nice help guide to somebody using your module on how to use it. So once I have all my parts, and you can see, for example, here, I have a just basic license. You could have other files in this folder that you distribute with it, and it will pull those into the design. So maybe you have an example designer file or something. It will grab the entire folder and bring it in and use it there. So once I place it in my modules folder, how do I get it in Designer? So we have renamed, stop emulating, rename the managed CSS styles to design resources. So this has been expanded now to include all my CSS, and now you can see Lua modules. And I can filter it up here by modules or styles. So you can see I have a bunch of different modules available. I can click on one. So there's Kolarczyk TV. We can see right here the name, the description, the version, the author. And we can see my README. Now, it formats the example code a little bit weird. I know that is on our roadmap to get that displaying a little bit better. But it gives me an easy way. And just like CSS, I can install it. I can have stuff installed in the designer file. So if somebody sends me a designer file and I don't have a module, I can download it back to my computer. And just like CSS, it knows when it's referencing a local source and will automatically pull in updates. So let's go ahead and get some modules. And this is one of the other really cool things with modules. Because it is all just external Lua based, we can use things like GitHub and Bitbucket to version and control our modules. So we have two examples we're going to download. The first one, I'm going to do just the sort of very traditional way. We're going to go to GitHub.
Hey, Kevin, how much of this is going to be sent out with the?
Yeah, we're going to send out the
video?
example file with all these examples in it.
Okay.
Many of these examples, and I will show you guys right now, are available in the help guide. So if I search for design resources, many of the additional examples. So here are, this is a link to the quote of the day we're using. This adding module that it talks through is very similar to the math one that I'm going to send out in a second. There are some really cool, deeper module examples here of doing AWS authentication, AWS poly text-to-speech. So if you want to do text-to-speech with Q-SYS, there's an example module for that. Fun bit of trivia, that's sort of what generated the this feature, was doing this AWS poly and realizing like a large portion of the code was just all the authentication with AWS, and realizing we need a better way to be able to distribute something not as heavily developed as a plugin, but be able to distribute code bases like this. So that's a great example. You can download the AWS authentication module, and then that is required in the poly module. So we're going to download. Let's go back to our GitHub. Here's our quote of the day. I can simply just download my module right here. And I'm going to extract it right to our Q-SYS Designer modules. And now we can see we have our quote of the day. The second way, and if you're doing version control, this probably feels a little more familiar, is I can use GitHub to just pull in. So I can do a very simple git clone, and I need to see my URL. It is https://bitbucket.org/ my window decided to jump over. See how many typing mistakes I can make in this. C colon. Oh, /. There we go. So I can use GitHub and clone down a copy of that repo. And it did exactly the same thing. So we can see we have math module now that pulled down. So we have math module, we have our quote of the day. And now if I want to import these into my design, I simply go to my design resources, filter by modules, we're going to install our math module, and we're going to see why our quote of the day did not show up. Let's Hold it. Let's rename it. Make sure I've got all my parts in it. Yep. I'll try it one more time. If not, I'll pull it down a different way. We'll come back and try that one in a second. So let's start with our math module. So here is my, oh, there we go. That one is there. We'll see what this is. Let's go to our math module and let's look at our init.lua. So like I said, everything in our module has to be a table. So in this case, I have a local table I define called math fun. And we simply add our functions into that. So I have a function mathfun.add. I pass in 2 parameters and we're going to return back a plus b for subtract, multiply, division, and random. So this is very, very simple. Probably would never use a module like this because we already have native math functions, but it's an easy way to sort of show how this goes. So let's go ahead and bring this into one of our scripts. And so I've got a blank script. The first thing I need to do is I'm going to do math functions equals require, and we give it the name of our module. So this module name is based off what the folder name is. So in our case, it's math module. And we'll go ahead and emulate right now. And so we need to now start doing some of our functions. So we look over here, we'll bring this on this side of the screen and bring Designer over here. So now I'm able to reference it as math functions dot add. So in our case, we'll just print math functions dot add. And I'm going to do 2 random numbers, 3 and 9. And we'll save and we get 12. So we can see it's referencing our function over here. It does whatever it needs to do and it returns. Pretty simple. So we can have functions pretty easily. We can expand this out. Print math functions dot subtract. So we'll subtract 9 and 3. We get 6. And functions multiply 3 and 9. Functions divide 9 and 3. Trying to make some nice whole numbers here. And then math functions dot random. And we'll pick a random number between 3 and 9. And when we run all this, oops, if I spell the last one right, there we go. So now we get the ability for all our different answers. So add, subtract, multiply, divide, random. So we just build a basic library and change it here. If I were to update this, so let's update add, and we're going to add a 3rd parameter in, and we'll do a plus b plus c, and save it. We can see Designer popped up. Hey, our Lua module has changed. Do we want to reload it? You have to be out of emulation mode for that, so you have to be in design mode. But now when we emulate, and we'll add our 3rd parameter here. There we go. Now we got 24. we had a little error because we didn't have a value for C in yet. But we can see we updated our module and pulled it right into Designer, and we're able to use that new version of the module.
Hi, Kev, I got 2 of them for you, and one of them may be for Greg.
Yeah, that'll give me a second to get my other one working.
If people are creating plugins that utilize their own modules, would the end user of that plugin also need to have that module and install it?
Yes. Yes is the simple answer on that one.
And would it
follow-up is-
automatically download it or flag it, or would that have to be something that was manually done?
They should. So depending on how the plugin is packaged, it would be feasible, and this is something that is being added to Asset Manager right now. So let's say, for argument's sake, you were trying to distribute this via Asset Manager. Yes, an Asset Manager install of a plugin with a required Lua module could be automated, so that once you've downloaded the package, everything gets extracted into the right area. If you're self-distributing it, then no, it will need to be manually installed. But we can talk about, well, what I can look into seeing if we can add that down the line. I definitely know that we're planning on treating these in the future with a similar installation utility to our quote unquote plugin helper, in terms of making sure that all these get dropped into the right area based off of the way that the module itself is packaged. But yeah.
The other question, and I have 2 of them that I believe are different wordings of the same question, which is inside of Q-SYS Designer Software, if you start typing, will Designer be able to recognize either the necessary parameters for a function and prompt for those, or will it do any of the autofill, kind of like when you're using VS Code as your editor and you start to type and it starts to autofill? Will it pull, will any of that autofill work with something that exists inside of a module?
Not today. But that is a good, I'll let Greg speak if he wants that. I would say it's a good feature.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's mechanically, I need to see what's feasible there. I think it's a perfectly reasonable request, and I think it would definitely be a benefit to this implementation. So yeah, I'm the right person to add it to the roadmap. We already have some other things planned around improvements to the embedded editor, the VS Code side of things. Yeah, I don't think there's really much we can do on that in terms of leveraging VS Code as an IDE. But the internal IDE that is labeled as VS Code, we are putting more and more features into in the next couple releases, and this is one that I can consider.
Well, I think I can see where, especially as people get used to having that little helper function when they're using the VS Code side inside Designer. I can definitely see where that would be handy.
Yep.
Cool.
All I got for now.
Awesome. Well, while you were doing that, I got my quote of the day to show up. I just restarted Designer and it came right in. So let's go on to our second example. So here we have our quote of the day. And I'm going to pull my Cheater file open over here. So we can see here's my module on the right. here's my Lua on the left. So we're going to do quote of the day equals require quote of the day. I'm going to actually require a second one here. I'm going to require JSON. So you can see it's extremely similar how we do it. So we're going to require our quote of the day module and our JSON here. So you can see if we look at how this one's authored, it has a different table name. It's using SM. It doesn't matter what name you make your table as long as we define our table, and the last thing we do is we return our table. So this all gets returned as a table back to our script. Now we can see what this is doing is it's actually opening up a CSV that's located inside our module folder. So here is my CSV that has tons and tons of author and quote. So there's, I don't even know how many, 1,658 quotes here from different various authors. And so the module is going to go through, it's going to run through and basically build a table called messages of all our quotes. And in that, we're going to see it's a table in there with the entry of the author and the quote. And then we see there's a function here. So we did function last time. Functions are pretty simple. We can run a function, we can return something. We don't have to return something. Maybe I just have a function that goes and does something. We'll see that with our Kowarczyk TV. But we can also access variables. So this messages table, we can access now in our script. So if I want to see all of those, I could just print. Remember, it's a table, so I'm going to JSON encode quote of the day dot messages. And this is going to be a huge table because it has a bunch of stuff in it. And we can see there is all 1,600-ish quotes right there. So we're able to reference that as, basically a variable we brought in. I could also reference it as print quote of the day dot messages, and I'm going to pick a random number. We'll do 72 dot quote, and we'll append on dash, and we'll append on quote of the day dot messages 72 dot author. And so we can see right here. So I'm able to reference those pieces of data from that variable table. So a lot of cool uses you could do with that. One thing Steve used to do a bunch was hospitality venues across multiple different places. You could actually, in theory, use a module to store all your channel lookup and then reference it this way. Probably not the most efficient way, but it is one way you could do that. So I can reference a piece of data from there, or we can reference our function. So if I want to, we'll comment that one out. And we're going to print a random message. And we're going to say our message is equal to quote of the day dot get random message. Now we're going to see this is going to return back. It's going to pick a random one of the quotes and give it back to us as a table. So we need to then either display it like we did here, or this is a great case of using string.format and go %s said quote %s single quote, and then our two bits of data are going to be msg.author msg.quote. And if I type that, all right, now we get our Peter Drucker said efficiency is doing things right, effectiveness is doing the right things. If we run this again, and we'll keep running. Let's see, there we go. Now we get a new random quote when it runs. So pretty easy way we can reference both variables and functions from our modules.
All right, I got one for you guys here. What
Yeah.
happens if a module that is part of someone else's design has the same name as an existing module on the disk?
When you open it up, I believe if it follows the same as CSS, it will say, hey, this has changed on disk. Do you want to load the updated module or use the module embedded in the design?
Yep, that is correct. That'll.
I think what they're saying is, like, if I have something that I've already created that's called my module,
Yeah.
and somebody sends me something that's something completely different, but there's also references a thing called my module, what happens when I try to, I mean, at that point, it would essentially require you to have two folders named my module.
Yeah,
Something needs to get renamed.
Go ahead, Kevin.
I was just saying, when you open the design, it's the same thing with CSS. If you have two CSS styles, the same name. Designer's going to prompt you, do you want to use the version embedded in the design file, or do you want to use the version off your local disk? You can't use both simultaneously, but you can say, I want to reference the local disk version, or I want to reference the version in Designer, or that's embedded in the .Q-SYS file, and then Designer will reference that one.
Yeah,
and then you could go and rename yours.
The gist is they will be treated like they're more or less the same thing. The designer isn't gonna increment in the file name or anything like that automatically. That is definitely not part of the feature. But you are going to be given that prompt, like Kevin said, so that you can make sure that you're not accidentally bringing in an unplanned module.
And Greg, the last question that's on here, I'll let you answer that one directly.
Let's see, for plugins, since the compiler already recognized certain comments in the code as compiler directors, it would be really cool if we could directly. Yes, this is entirely possible. So I don't know how the Q&A here is set up, so I apologize. I'll read it out loud. Just if I can.
Yeah, that's perfect.
Find it.
I cleared it. You want me to read it? I have it right here.
Yeah. Go. Just. Oh, I've got it here. So yeah. So for plugins, since the compiler already recognizes certain comments in the code as compiler directives, it would be really cool if we could directly embed modules into our plugins during the design phase of the plugins using compiler directives similar to hash include properties.lua blah blah blah. So if you're not, for those of you who are on the call, if you're not familiar with the quote unquote plugin compiler, which is a misnomer in of itself because it's more of a concatenator than a compiler. We are doing exactly what David asked, and we have things so that we basically are modularizing a plugin into separate .lua files. Similarly, treating modules in this fashion, not only is that feasible, but I think it's highly desirable. I need to verify that isn't already included. But if it isn't, then I will make sure that it gets added. But I do believe this is something that we had been talking about, supporting modules using the quote unquote plugin compiler. That's it.
Cool. Awesome. So let's go ahead to our last example. So like we said at the beginning, Colarchic TV decided for 2022 to change their API from TCP to UDP, change their command set and everything. So what we're going to do is I'm going to take our Colarchic TV. I'm just going to copy and paste it We're going to call this our TV 2022. And let's go ahead and modify this. So I'm going to change my info. I'm going to call this Colarchic TV 2022 emulator. And let's open up our init.lua. And I'm just going to blast out pretty much everything in here. So we just have a blank starting place. And we're going to sort of quickly build this up. So I'm using functions here. This could be whatever we want to call it. Actually, for you, we'll call this Steve for today. So Steve is going to be our table of functions.
Yay.
So here I can do any, like I said, we can use any libraries we have. So I'm going to use our UDP library. I'm going to build my socket. I'm going to say emulator equals UDP socket.new. We're going to build our event handler. Say emulator.event handler equals function packet. And our line equals packet.data and print line. So we can see what comes back from it. And then if string.line. And this is a very, very basic. So our device here said it changed the power response to it is on, as opposed to, I think, power on is what we used to look for. So if our line finds power is on with a null. So if we find that, then we'll talk in a second what we're doing with this, but we're setting a variable here, setting the Boolean of a variable here equal to true. Else if string.find in line of our power is off does not equal nil, then we're doing does not equal nil because we basically are just saying, hey, if you find this, then do this. We don't really care where it found it in our packet. And that. And we're going to connect our socket. So this will be steve.connect. That. Port. And I'm going to copy and paste a couple of these lines in so I don't mistype all of this. So we're going to open. We don't care what IP we open on our UDP, what number, what port number we want. So we're going to run it through a 2-number just in case it gets passed in as a string. We're going to set a variable that we're going to track of our emulator IP because we're going to use that for our responses. And then we're going to make a couple different functions right here. So we do steve.power on. So when we get a power on, we're going to do emulator send, because this is UDP, so it's a little different than TCP. Emulator IP address, emulator port, and turn it on. Yeah. Same thing with our power off. So I'll just copy this. We'll make our power off. And it off. And power on, power off, and then our source is going to be Steve. Just copy our power off actually. Source, and its command is tune to source. And we're going to pass in our source number we want to go to. So we'll add a parameter to our function, tune to source, IDX, This is really fun with split screen. Cool. Tune to source and then send our null. And then our last thing for how to do feedback. And there's a lot of different ways you can do this. There's definitely some more efficient ways. But I want to be able, I have a power, we go back and look at our example. We have our power feedback control here. And so we are going to do our Steve dot power feedback equals function, and we're going to pass a control in. And we're basically going to link that control from our Lua script into our function here. So power feedback, that variable we used earlier, is going to be equal to our control. So now when we're setting this power feedback dot Boolean, it's going to become, we're actually setting a control in our main script. And this should be, actually, it is on. And it is off. I'm gonna make sure I wrote my emulator that way too. So once we get done with all that, so we have all our stuff, we'll save this. And we'll come back. So I'm going to go ahead and move this out of the way. And we'll come to our design resources. We'll come to modules, Klarchik TV 2022. And so now we can see here it is included. And so now all I have to do is take that same code we used at the beginning of our script, bring that right down here, and go ahead and we're going to change one line in this. Klarchik TV 2022. So that's all. Because we followed the same structure that we did in our initial, I don't have to change anything here. So I'm calling this display 1. I'm doing my connect where I tell it to connect. I'm doing my power on, my power off. I can send my sources. And here's where I link my power feedback control. So now if we go ahead and I'm going to find my emulator window, we can see, yep, here is our emulators. We're going to change, we're using port 17117. And now I've got, sorry, grabbing the wrong part of the window to drag it over. Here's our TV, here's our designer. And now we were able to switch it really easily from there's our sources. I think I did actually write my emulator the wrong way. So we can see if I switch this back really quickly to 5101 and Klarchik TV. Now this script is using TCP and talking with this TV. I got my sources. And if we just switch it back to 2022, 17117. Now we are talking with our UDP. So that's really the beauty of this is the only thing I had to change right here was this name, but maybe if I wrote this for the job, I just go and edit that initial Klarchik TV module I have, and now I just changed. The underlying code is vastly different between the two of these, you know, between our UDP code and our TCP code, because they're very different. They have a different API and everything. But in our design file, it's exactly the same. So that's really sort of the power we get here with modules is I can do this, especially too. I could have somebody else develop the module for me and just give me the hooks I need into my module. And I'm able to control it that way.
Two things that could you possibly recover just to make sure that everybody understands some of the fundamental differences between working with a module and just working within in Lua. For starters, just to reiterate that very much like when you are controlling an internal component and you give it some kind of a variable name and then, you know, equals component.new, and then you just type that in. That's essentially what we're doing with that very top line where we're requiring that module. So, and then if you would be so kind as to go back into your VS Code of the actual module. A module doesn't actually have controls, right? So what you're building in, like with the event handler for the emulator or essentially everything, is you are referencing these variables, if you will, like anything that's a function inside the module kind of comes up almost like how you would refer to the individual controls of an internal component that you were talking to. So, you know, that's how you get display one.power on and display one.power off, is that those are defined functions inside the module. Very much like we have defined controls. If you're controlling a gain, then you have, you know, the mute state, and you have the actual gain as a number. You have, you know, increment, decrement. You have all of those that are defined parameters, and that's essentially what we're doing when we define these functions. But since everything technically lives in a big giant table, that's why you create that table at the top and give it whatever your name is, and then dot whatever, you know, this one, Steve dot power on. That's power on is something that you can refer to later. It's almost like you're creating a function called power on inside the table of Steve, but the table of Steve is the wrapper in which everything under that module named Kalarchik 2022 lives. So it was just a syntax thing that I kind of wanted to go back over one last time now that they've seen how it's built. I just wanted to go over some of that syntax so that everybody was up to speed.
And it's really the equivalent of what I did here. It is the equivalent of taking all that code, dumping it in right here. So in theory, when I run this, it probably doesn't like how I'm doing it, but it is the equivalent when Lua sees the required Kalarchik TV, it's just reading all this code right in here. So that's one reason we define this as a local table, so that you don't run into shared variable names and everything. One thing I will say with how I built this, because I called this emulator, this works for I can do one of these displays in my project. If I wanted to run multiple, I would probably do something with a more unique name on my UDP emulator name. But all I'm doing, this require, is just saying, hey, when I get to this, go read this file and dump all that code right there.
So is there a way to read all of the available functions in a module via Lua? Like, I mean, in essence, you can print that table, can't you?
Yeah. Let's. I believe. It doesn't like encoding it. I believe there is a way to do it. I'll have to dig into figuring it out, but I believe there is, I know I've seen ways you can do it and show all the available. Actually, I don't think that'll do it. No. I will look that one up and we'll follow up with that one.
Yeah, I don't recall off the top of my head either.
I know I've seen it before. I just got to remember how to do it.
Yeah. Rest assured, if there isn't a good way of doing it, I'll add something.
Yep.
Next question is, can modules store information in internal variables to be retrieved later from the module instance? Well, I mean, that's essentially, correct me if I'm wrong, but that's pretty much what we're doing with some of these controls, like your powerfb.boolean. I mean,
Yeah, I think
is,
so.
That is a variable inside that module, correct?
So Steve.myVariable equals 10. And then we're going to come down here and let's see. Actually, let's do it this way. Steve.myVariable, we'll set it to 0 initially, and then we will set this when we change our source. We'll set our variable equal to the source number, and we will print it. So now, let's save that. Come back here, come out of emulation. There we go. So now we have this. So let's start our script again. So I can print display one dot we call that my variable. And we will print that right now. So when our script starts, we're going to print that and we get 0. And then we'll come back over here, turn our emulator on, watch a source, and we get 2 right there. So we are able to, yes, and we can reference that whenever we do it. Now, when we start over, it's of course going to restart, but yes, so I could print it that way. I could also print, let's do this. We'll call our source and then we'll print again. Print my variable is now equal to, this would be display my variable. So now when we switch our source, 1, 2, 3, 4.
Hey, is it just me or does it look like the autofill is working?
It's because I defined it down there.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Once you create a variable, autofill remembers it.
Yeah. One thing I wanted to clarify, because I managed to get somebody to test it. I'll admit that I didn't test it. But I think this may have been the question. I think this was the question that Mike asked via somebody else's link. But the question about doing an include of modules, they obviously the syntax for, basically hash module doesn't exist right now, but simply doing an include and writing out the entire file path will include a module. It doesn't necessarily need to be local to the repo, the plugin repo. You can actually define it. I don't think that's going to be practical for production long term, but it was confirmed that works right now, semi unsurprisingly, since it's just a .lua file.
Awesome. Well, cool. Let's see. I think we got one last question. It'd be nice if there's a way you could referencing QSC created. Wiring all your display controls the same then.
Yeah, so I can talk about this a
Okay.
little bit. I mean, first and foremost, yes, we are gonna, we added module support to Q-SYS Designer fairly recently. And the upcoming version, an upcoming release of Q-SYS Designer, not 9.6, but 9.7, will add support to Asset Manager. Right now, we don't have Asset Manager isn't handling module packages appropriately in 9.5. So we're going to be adding support to Asset Manager in 9.7. And right, I mean, in terms of QSC developed items, especially given the application that was given here, which is wire in all your display controls the same, and then just reference a module to match the actual installed product at the end of installation. We, for a long time now, at least the last 3-4 years, have been authoring all of our display drivers with standard naming for exactly this reason. We're trying to make it easier to do some swap outs. So for any modules that, and they will be, when they start showing up in Asset Manager, you will see that they are authored by QSC or Q-SYS. You can rest assured that they will have standard names to make that easy, easy swap outs over time.
Cool. Let's see. We got some more questions coming. Before we get to those, I just want to thank everybody because we are at the top of the hour. Thanks for coming out. You will get a recording of this with this example file sent out in a couple days. So you'll have those examples to look at. There's some good examples in the help guide, and start playing with it. So thank you all for coming. We'll stick around and answer some of these questions, and then, you know, hope to see everybody again soon.
Cool. So to the question of if the standard naming convention that we follow is released so that you can follow it, sure, yes, we can document that. That's easy enough. I will say that we don't we intentionally do not encrypt any of our, well, with a couple of exceptions, but we do not typically encrypt any of our internally developed plugins. So that you can look at the naming convention right now. Just open up any recent display plugin and it should follow it. But yeah, I think that's something that we can release into communities pretty easily in terms of what that naming is. And then another question that came up was, is there a way to extract a module or even CSS for what was embedded in the Q-SYS file? And yes, so what Kevin's showing on screen right now is called Design Resources. And the Design Resources tab, which is accessible under Tools, is there you go, Design Resources under Tools. You're able to you are able to save things that are embedded in the design to disk. So that includes Lua modules, that includes CSS styles, and in the future, it'll also include things like plugins, image files, that type of stuff, where we are planning on some expansion. Basically, Design Resources and Asset Manager will probably merge into a single tool in the future, is the plan. So, but yes, you can download, or you can extract them and modify them locally on your machine using Design Resources. Though this is unrelated to what we're talking about, I know people take advantage. Windows 11 support is officially planned. I don't recall, I think it's 9.7 or 9.8. I think it might be 9.8 that we're going to be officially supporting Windows 11. But an upcoming Q-SYS Designer release will officially support Windows 11. So 9.5 is not a bug fix. Well, there's no planned bug fix for 9.5 to work on Windows 11. But I think our LTR, so our long-term release support, will or long-term release will get Windows 11 support at some point in time, and then a upcoming version of Q-SYS Designer will officially add Windows 11 support.
LTS, is that what it is? 943 LTS?
It's not going to be 943. It'll probably be some other version of the LTS, but yeah. What did I say? LTR? Yeah, LTS.
Yeah.
Well, long-term support.
MOUSE.
In terms of, I will say, Daniel, there are a number of people that are getting Q-SYS Designer to work on parallels with Windows 11. There's some stuff that you got to deal with, but it does work. It's just not officially supported.
And I think, well, I'm gonna look. I believe so. Part of the why it's not working right now has to deal with actually the install portion. And I believe, where's my? I believe that is actually in 9.6 will allow it to be done, but it is still not officially supported.
Yeah.
So I thought I saw it in the.
I'm pretty sure that sounds very familiar, Kevin.
Yeah. So in 9.6, you can once again install Q-SYS Designer on an ARM-based platform such as M1 Mac without installation error. And just note, installation of Q-SYS Designer on ARM platforms is not officially supported yet.
Yep.
Shenanigans.
That's right. Anyways.
Awesome. Well, I want to thank everybody for coming out this morning. We had a nice big crowd, and yeah, hopefully this is something you can start embracing and using in your projects moving forward. I know there are at least a couple examples on communities that like James Martin from our EMEA team has posted. Please use that as another resource to find some examples. And, if you start making some you want to share, communities is a great place to post these. Cool. So with that, I will go ahead and once again, thanks for coming out, and hopefully we'll see you guys again. I'm trying to remember if we have one next week. I believe we do have one next week. And then the November schedule should be coming out very soon as well. So thank you all. Have a great day.
Bye, everybody. Have a good one.